We are here. Hello, my fellow Alaskans. Hopefully you are receiving this loud and clear today. I should know here in just a little bit when I get my notification on my page. Oh, there we are. We are live. I hear myself loud and clear. That is so awesome. So we are here today to do what I have been wanting to do for a while. We are going to expose the corruption of the Alaska Ledge, the FBI, Alaska Edge, PFD Corporation, Alaska House, Alaska Senate Finance Committees, and Alaska House Ways and Means Committee. What do they all have in common? This is the major question of the day, and this is what I'm hoping to be able to answer for you all. So please tune in. If you're just joining us right now, please like and share this video. Greatly appreciated if you do. You're not going to hear this kind of information anywhere else. I have been digging on this information for quite a while now. Watching last week's SB 199 and HB 260, sat through and listened through that bill this weekend. That one was snuck in by the House Ways and Means Committee. But there's a lot of stuff going on down there in Juneau that they're trying to keep covered up, like the FBI investigation. So where do we all stand at nowadays? I mean, it's currently the PFD debate is Alaskans versus Alaska Ledge. And you can see the picture there. This is from Dumb and Dumber. And our PFD, which happens to be the pole that is frozen solid that Alaska Ledge keeps sticking their tongue to, trying to make sure that their tongue would not really get stuck if they continue to keep stealing from our permanent fund dividend. Just a little bit of a funny there for all of you. Just thought I would share that one for us all here today. And so where do we all go from here? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going on, so let's just jump right into this. And we got the FBI investigation. And FBI came into Alaska about November of 2021. They did a investigation. They talked to about 20 senators and some in the House of Representatives there in Juneau. And they're investigating fraud and corruption here in Alaska. If you go by the FBI list, when you list fraud and corruption throughout the entire United States of America, Alaska is ranked number 2, only behind DC. So when you look at when we're looking at the investigation that's going on, what are they looking for? Pay to play. How many of our legislators are currently sitting down there in Juneau right now that are there strictly to pay to play? It's really hard to say, and it has a lot to do with our permanent fund dividend corporation. As you can see with the picture that I've got sitting there right now, that is the first one that I pulled up. I'm doing a little bit of switching here so I can read things as we go. This is from the Anchorage Daily News. FBI questions Alaska lawmakers on topics including the permanent fund dividend program. From the Juneau Empire, same question, same response. Why are the FBI, why are they here in Alaska, and why are they investigating the permanent fund dividend and Alaska lawmakers? Well, coincidentally, you know, there's been a couple of resignations that are going to be happening this year. And in other words, I mean that they're just not going to run in the 2022 elections. 2 of those names is Natasha Von Imhof and Josh Kresh Tompkinson. They both decided not to run, even though they were in pretty secure seats in pretty secure districts and had no chance of really losing if they were to have run again. Their namesake and the battles that they have been fighting, and those that pay to play to make sure that they get reelected every single year would have made sure that they were sitting back in office again. And they just decided what they wanted to do. So here's one from the Alaska Landmine. Notice you can see they're a little bit more blunt about it. Senate in apparent pay for play. FBI investigating members there in the Senate, wondering what they got going on and why they are doing what they are doing. So here we got the House, Senate, and the Senate, or House and Senate Joint Committee Auditing Committee for the PFD Corporation, and these are the folks that are sitting there in the room right now that you can see in the picture next to me there. And these folks are deciding on whether or not to subpoena board members. They're currently asking these board members, the ones that decided to show up for this committee hearing, and discuss why Rodell had been terminated, why she had lost her job. Lots of investigation went in this type of meeting that had occurred, and let me just pull up the names of the folks that we have there. We got Senator Natasha von Imhof, and Senator Pete Micciche, Senator Laura Reinbold, Senator Bert Stedman, Senator Lyman Hoffman, Senator Click Bishop, Cleninger, Representative Chris Tuck, Representative Ivy Spinanshold, Representative Andy Jefferson, Representative Neil Foster, Representative James Kosman, and Representative Dan Ortiz. So what is really going on here? These are the folks that are currently investigating the Permanent Fund Dividend Corporation for the firing of Rodell, pretty much an at-will employee that by a vote of the board, they had unanimously decided, I think it was, or almost unanimously, I think it was like the vote was 5-1, to vote her out of her position in the Permanent Fund Corporation as the lead investigator. These folks right there. Now, at the end of this particular meeting that we're looking at here in front of us right now, they voted 10-1 to grant themselves subpoena power to go after Rodell and the people that had let her go. So let's do just a little bit of reading on what we got going on here. And this is from Alaska Public Media. Lawmakers issue subpoenas in a move to make Alaska Permanent Fund Corporation board members talk about the Rodell firing. The legislative meeting took steps Tuesday in an investigation, this was March 15th, of the firing of the former Alaska Permanent Fund Corporation Executive Director Angela Rodell, opening the door to force the corporation board members to testify. The Legislative Budget and Audit Committee, there in front of you right now, voted 10-0 to issue subpoenas to all 6 of the corporate board members, 4 employees, and Department of Revenue worker. The committee met after State Department law rejected an earlier attempt by the investigators to interview the trustees and employees. In other words, they didn't willingly come in to testify to them. Why would they? They are a corporation. They should not be subjected to this type of inquiry, other than that the bottom line is those in this committee are those that are actually paying to play. Not all of them in this committee are guilty of that. But those that are paying to play down in their Juneau are trying to cover up their underhandedness and what they have been doing. They're communicating with Rodell behind the scenes, and I'll break into that here in just a little bit more about what I mean by that. So this also said the investigation threatens the board's independence. It says there's a problem. The committee chair, Senator Natasha von Imhof, the chair of this committee, Republican of Anchorage, is friends with Rodell and has been given subpoena authority. So here we've got Senator Natasha von Imhof, which I'll break into a little bit, that has really close ties with Rodell, and not covered yet, but has also been communicating with her behind the scenes as her representative of her family, the Rasmuson Foundation. Now, Christopher Slate is a lawyer hired by the committee to investigate. He said he would, again, ask the trustees and staff members to testify voluntarily. If they respond and say they will not do so, then we will proceed with subpoenas to those individuals who refuse to sit down with voluntary interview while they are moving forward with the investigation, gathering the facts of the upcoming impartial and objective evidence-based report, he said. So in other words, they've given him the powers. It's kind of like the witch hunt that's going on down there in D.C. with Pelosi and the Trump, January 6th, we won't release the videos, we won't release the information that shows the innocence of many of those people and the cover-up that's going on there. That's similar to what is happening here, kind of like the DNC and the Russian hoax investigation. It kind of all plays together. The Whitmore in Michigan, and the FBI involvement in that. Well, the FBI is involved in this too. Now, they have gone directly in and they raided, so to speak, Juneau. They interviewed 20 of them down there in Juneau, asking different questions. Several names came up during the investigation over and over and over again. One of them happens to be Senator Natasha von Imhof. Another one was Jas Crash Tompkinson. No irony behind them, neither one running in this next year's election, even though, as I stated earlier, they both could get back in very easily. The pay-to-play special interests out there would make sure of it, just like they've done year after year. So that was from the Alaska public media on the current investigation. Homer News, pretty much, they had the exact same thing. Bill proposed, let me see, this one is in regards, PFD formula proposal provokes strong public reaction. We're going to step away from the investigation here real quick, but actually I'm going to move on to somebody else and we'll come back to this. We got Must Read Alaska. Legislative Committee asks Permanent Fund Chairman for answers on CEO's firing. Senator Natasha von Imhof, Chairwoman of Legislative Budget and Audit Committee, wants answers from the Permanent Fund Chairman Craig Richards about why the board trustees suddenly fired CEO Angela Rodell. Quote, the dismissal was abrupt and APCF has not provided any explanation for its actions or a clear plan for a professional and timely leadership transition. The board actions threaten to send a message of management instability to the APFC during a time of global uncertainty, she wrote. Oh man, Natasha sure can lay it on thick. The greed and entitlement, it's just astounding. So Rodell was dismissed by the board on a vote of 5-1. Yeah, I thought that was right. 5-1 during the December 9th quarterly meeting of the Board of Trustees. The board has stated that it was a personal matter and is confidential. The board shouldn't have to be explaining to Alaska legislators why they let someone go. The only reason why Alaska legislators are upset is because their inside man, or in this case inside woman, in the Permanent Fund Corporation that was doing their pay-to-play bidding for their current PFD theft, which is what I started to read just a second ago, but we'll get there later. They want to cover up the evidence that shows that there is a pay-for-play going on. Natasha von Imhof is directly into the center of all of this. Ironically enough, she is the one that is also one of the lead sponsors of SB 199, which we'll get into more detail here in a little bit on that particular bill. As Alaska Permanent Fund with it has the $83 billion in assets. So our Permanent Fund Dividend Corporation out there is reporting roughly around $81.33 billion inside of the corporation right at this very moment in time. This is as of the March quarterly report. Our final end of the year fiscal report comes out at the end of the June. I'm expecting that to hit around that 83 billion mark that is listed here by Must Read Alaska. So where was I? There it is. The board chairman, Craig Richards, was initially placed on the board by former Governor Bill Walker and was retained by Governor Mike Dunleavy. Others on the board include designated seats for Commissioner of Revenue, Commissioner of Natural Resources. All but one of the members, Bill Moran, were appointed by Dunleavy. Von Imhof said in her letter that because the permanent fund now provides more than 65% of the state's revenue and is now without a CEO, the public and the policy makers need to know what transpired. In other words, they're upset that their inside man, Rodell, was fired and was eliminated from her job, and they're no longer being able to manipulate the Permanent Fund Corporation into mirroring the response that the Alaska legislators want them to give to justify their PFD theft. And it's been very evident in the meetings going through this year when you're listening to when the corporation actually comes in and does their discussions on the budget. They're very clear that the government's draw is detrimental to destroying the permanent fund. It's not the people's portion, or PFD, that is causing that to happen. But you got to really pay attention to hear the subtle shift in what they're saying, because they don't make it as bluntly clear as I just did. Von Imhof said in her letter that because the permanent fund now provides more than 64%, the CEO and public policies must transpire. Repeating myself. Quote, hiding behind employees' confidentiality by refusing to provide information or transparency regarding the process followed by the board or its goal and intent contradicts the board giving principles stated on your website, she wrote. Von Imhof said the Legislative Budget and Audit Committee has a responsibility to see that the permanent fund exists in perpetuity and not politicized. Well, wait a minute. They're the ones that politicized this 7 years ago when they allowed Walker to steal the very first one. And ever since then, Natasha von Imhof and the legislators down there in Juneau have successfully gone after our permanent fund dividend, and they have made it a political talking point that has stalled legislation, any meaningful legislation down there in Juneau, year after year, as they try to contemplate and solidify the theft of the PFD forever, which is what they're getting ready to maybe accomplish this year. I'll get into that later. She is asking Richards to provide for the committee the following information. Any and all communications from 2019 to present between trustees and executive branch State of Alaska performance of Rodell. Any and all communications from 2019 to present between the trustees and the executive branch related to the decision of firing Rodell. Wow, they're really getting into the personal information of why this person was let go. Sounds familiar to me that they're prepping probably for a lawsuit, even though Rodell said that that she pretty much deserved what she got, is what I've gained through other sources out there. Any and all communications from 2019 to present between employees of Alaska Permanent Fund Corporation executive branch related to the performance and decision of the firing of Rodell as CEO. Copies of employee surveys presented to APC, conduct received from any source, copy of Rodell's employment contract, copies of all policies and procedures regarding employment termination, discipline, counseling of employees, copies of all reports and documents considered by the board meeting at which the board terminated Rodell, copies of all benchmark reports used by the board to evaluation of Rodell in 2021, and any communications from 2019 to present, any fund managers, investment banks, or third parties of board that raised concerns on Rodell's performance. And then there's a big long list that was provided for there on her website for that particular information for the PFD. So why is all this kind of interesting to know? Well, we'll go into the next one for Must Read Alaska. She did a really good job of breaking this stuff down, and I do appreciate her forethought. It makes my job a lot easier to report this stuff. Emails show former President Fund CEO had extensive political consultations and personal alliances with Senator Natasha von Imhof. Yes, you just heard that correctly. Rodell and Natasha von Imhof and the foundation, Rasmuson Foundation, which her family owns, which she also sits on the board of, have an extensive and long history together, personal relationship, and I'm sure if we dig deep enough and we can see it, I've seen it in the budget, you can clearly see when it happens. It's on a local, federal, and state level for funding for the budgets out out there that are feeding into the Rasmuson Foundation's coffers every single year. And Senator Natasha von Imhof sits on the Senate Finance Committee that decides that this money is going to go and where it's going to go and into her family's foundation every single year. A good chunk of it flows right into. So a series of emails obtained public records requests show that the former CEO of Alaska Permanent Fund, Alaska, Angela Rodell, had extensive email conversations of political nature with Senate Finance Co-Chair Senator Natasha von Imhof. Von Imhof, in an announcement this month, said that her Legislative Budget and Audit Committee would subpoena the Board of Trustees for the Alaska Permanent Fund. She said she wanted to ensure the fund is not being politicized. She is investigating the firing of the former CEO, Angela Rodell. Wow. Natasha wants to get down to the bottom of the corruption of what is going on there. Why did she get fired? And I think she's more upset. This is retaliation that her pay-to-play partner inside of the PFD or corporation is no longer there, and this is very upsetting to those in control of the Senate Finance and the House Finance and the House Ways and Means Committee, because the person that was helping to manipulate the conversation through the Permanent Fund Corporation is no longer there. Von Imhof, in announcing this month that her Legislative Budget and Audit Committee would subpoena the Board of Trustees of Alaska Permanent Funds, she wanted to ensure that it's not being politicized. She is investigating the former CEO, but the records show that over the years she has an extensive political conversation and influence on Rodell in many matters related to the fund, including the bill that Rodell was trying to get passed in legislature. Rodell's bill was another PFD form that Imhof and Ivy Spanonsholz has both put out into the budgets this year, SB 199 and SB 260 and SB 259. All were hand-built and crafted and designed behind the scenes, I'm sure, if the investigation goes far enough, may uncover the paid-for-play that is going on there. Their relationship is also personal, something von Imhof has disclosed to the public in one of the emails. Von Imhof, chief of the staff, made an arrangement for von Imhof and Rodell to attend a theater performance together in Juneau. So not only are they doing things together in Juneau for the Senate, they're doing things on a personal level, going to different plays, and in this case, a performance at the theater. They have had dinners together, so on and so forth. And a text message revealed a friendship Rodell comment on von Imhof was the bomb. Von Imhof had given Rodell the cell phone number for the fund trustee of the Corey Frank Corporation. I believe that would be who it is. And here you go. It was a picture there sent from her. And in the article that I'm reading there, I wish I would have captured that so I could put it on the screen right now. But if you go to Must Read Alaska, you will be able to find this. And as I went to go, I just typed in PFD Corporation and Rodell, and it was amazing all the articles that came written up about this, and I picked the best ones out of the group. So von Imhof has stated repeatedly that she does not have any relationship with Rodell, but by this FOIA request, or the request for information that was put forward by Must Read Alaska, they disclosed over 50 documents and emails that were correspondence between the two of them, with discussions of even pay for play, discussing current legislation that is rolling through our Juneau government right now, the PFD Corporation working hand in hand with them to write what their agenda was and not be able to say what the real pay to play that is going on down there in Juneau. Man, that's a lot of talking going on there for, it seems like, just a little bit of information, but hopefully you guys caught it all there. Big pay for play scam going on there in Juneau with them. You got the House and their investigation. These are the people on that committee that was in that meeting that was directly in front of us. Snap a picture of this, share it far and wide. These folks are investigating, many of them that you see in the pictures there, Stedman, Imhof, Ivy Spinonsols, Josephson, Foster. These folks are there for pay for play. They all need to be removed from office. You got Ortiz down there in the bottom, Chris Tuck. I mean, there's only maybe two people in this entire list here that I will give any credence to, and that would be Senator Laura Reinbold. She's one person that I know that would stand true and strong for Alaskans on this committee. And Senator Pete McKitchie, maybe he's kind of wishy-washy. I can't really give him much credit for much of anything. But when you take a look at who is in charge of this, is Senator Natasha von Imhof and Representative Chris Tuck, two of the leading people in both the House and the Senate that have everything to lose if this investigation uncovers the pay for play. And by what just was pulled up by Must Read Alaska, please, if you haven't seen the emails and gone through them all, go look it up, go through the docs of the FOIA requests that they got and all the information that was pulled up on the conversations between Natasha von Imhof and Rodell and her staff and the different bills that they discussed, and talking about the fund outside of Juneau that was affecting legislation happening within Juneau there. All right, let's move on to a different portion here. We've got our permanent fund dividend. Yes! Woo! Permanent Fund Corporation reports there's $81.387 million sitting there in the PFD Corporation's fund. $64.1 billion of that is currently sitting in the corpus, can't be touched by our legislators, can't be spent by them without the vote of us Alaskans, the way the entire thing should be. So then you got the ERA uncommitted. This is what they call the realized gains, the money that is sitting there that is actual cash that's not waiting to be paid off or anything else. That's $10.4 billion. And then you got $5.7 billion in unrealized gains. These are things that have projected profits. Let's say you was smart and you had Netflix stock and you had bought into it, and before it tanked, you sold it all. That would go into the realized gains of 10.4. But because you weren't smart and you've held on to that and you have now found that it has tanked by a good 30 to 50%, I think it's 60% now, lower in stock value than what it was here just recently, that $5.7 billion would actually be like $5.5 billion because we lost $200 million on stock that money was invested in. So that's unrealized gains. So you understand the difference between the two. Money you have in your hand and money you could have had in your hand, depending on which direction that money's invested in and the return that is returned upon it. They say year to date for fiscal 2022, there's only been a 3.04% return on the permanent fund corporation this year. But here in a second, we'll see why that's just one big giant lie. So let's break this down a little bit. Here's the upper half of that bigger picture that you just saw. The total fund that is sitting there, and we've got $64.1 billion sitting there in the corpus and $17.3 billion sitting in the earnings reserve account. The principal and the ER uncommitted, the principal stays the same because that is already realized gains. And the ERA uncommitted, it now, instead of showing 17.3, it now shows 10.4 billion as being uncommitted. And there's a reason for that, and that's in the smaller print down below, which we'll now bring up here. In the smaller print down below, this is the lower half here that I missed out on. Sorry about that. That'll be the next picture. And here's the added value of the $5.7 billion that goes on top of that 10.4 there in the corner to give you that 17.3. And the rate of return, they say year to date, was only 3.4%. But if you look down in the small print, right down underneath it, it says the actual rate of return has been 10.81% over just the last 5 years. So ignore that 3.04. The real number is the 10.81%. On average, our PFD corporation has received an over 6% return on the permanent fund corporation since its existence since 1976, and since the corporation started delivering dividends since 1982. Now we'll move into the third picture, and that was the one I said was going to be blown up. Here's the ERA uncommitted, and I want to break this down a little bit where they get the $17.3 billion from. Committed for fiscal year 23 POMV draw. So they already account for $3.4 billion being stolen to pay for this year's budget. That should be going towards our permanent fund dividend, not the budget. Unrealized gains from that. This is money that is just kind of floating out there. That's the stock of Netflix that we own and still own, and found that the stock market went down on it, so that 3.5 billion might be 3.4 billion now because that stock went down. That's the unrealized gains portion of this, for a total of $17.3 billion. Mind you, everything that I have just shown you here is only current till March. The fiscal year for the Permanent Fund Corporation doesn't end until the end of June, so that report is still yet to come out. Instead of that $81.35 billion that we saw in the very first picture there, that 81.3 right there, that total balance is supposed to be up to about $83 billion. I'm expecting around $82.5 billion is what I've been estimating since day one. Oh man, it just the list here just keeps going on and on. All right, let's move on up here. We've got the Mine Investigation Committee. The House vote. We got the House vote here for the budget, and this is for the PFD number 1 vote for a full statutory PFD. And take note, the vote was 18 to 21. 18 yeas for the statutory PFD, 21 nays for the statutory PFD. Let's see if I got it blown up. There we go. And every person that is sitting there in red, these are the folks that have been trying to steal our permanent fund dividends since day one. Hands down, they will vote to steal it every single time. That is Clayman, Drummond, Edgman, Fields, Hanna, Hopkins, Josephson, Kaufman, Crest Tompkinsons, LeBon, Kelly Merrick, all that rhino, Ortiz, Siraji, Snyder, Spanonzold, Story, Stutes, Tarr, Thompsonson, Wool, and Zelowowski. I am really shocked to see Tuck actually vote for a statutory PFD, but you know, when you know your vote doesn't matter, it's not going to give them enough to be able to go the other direction. It doesn't hurt to vote yes for a change. This is the way I feel about Chris Tuck down there in Juneau. And there's a few other ones here. I mean, Kaufman, what the hell? I mean, I would have swore you were a Republican, but going by your vote every single time, you sold out to the special interests, and that's what you did this year, and it's very, very apparent to what is going on down there in Juneau. So that was the vote in the House, and obviously the statutory PFD did not pass there. So what is going on in the Senate? Here, just off to the right, I know it's a little bit small, the Senate Finance administers a hearing to the CSHB 281. This is their budget for the state budget right now. And amendment number 3, offered by Senator Bill Wielechowski for the full statutory PFD dividend, would have been applied $4,300 each, failed on a vote of 4-3. And that vote of 4-3, let me get the bigger blown up here. We've got the 3 yeses were Olson, Wilson, and Wielechowski were the only 3 to vote yes. It failed because Stedman, Bishop, Imhof, and Hoffman all voted no for that, for the statutory PFD. Why is this so important to know? Because we got SB 199. Oh man, this bill is so damn corrupt, it's unreal. SB 199. And here is a fine example of how SB 199 works. All right, so currently right now with no taxes, permanent fund dividend is at $1,100. The bottom of the stairs there, your head, probably your neck is broken because you've fallen down so far because they pushed you down the stairs because they didn't want you to have that upper tier amount. They wanted to make sure that you got your, you just pay the price. So how does this SB 199 work? Well, the first year is going to be $1,100. That would be this year, $1,100. The next year would be $1,200. So the year after that would be $1,200. The year after that would be $1,300. And then by 2026, or by 2025 is what they have written there, as long as they add $700 million in new taxes, we'll give you a whole 50% of your PFD. Oh, the generosity of their hearts to pay us a permanent fund dividend using taxes instead of following the statutory formula where that 81.3 some billion dollars is currently sitting in. That's where they're supposed to be pulling that money out from. But nope, you can see by this sitting there right now in front of us that their idea of paying us a permanent fund dividend all depends upon how much they can raise in taxes before they'll ever give us a permanent fund dividend, because they want to use taxes to pay for it, not use the transfer from the earnings reserve account as the statutory law says they're supposed to do. Now, who brought this bill forward? There, sitting in the corner, you've got the Senate Finance Committee, and I believe I got a better picture of that committee there. Let me see if I can pull them up. There they are. We've got Senator Click Bishop, Senator Bert Stedman, Senator Lyman Hoffman, Senator Natasha von Imhof, Senator David Wilson, Senator Donnie Olson, and Senator Bill Wielechowski. These are the folks that sit on the Senate Finance Committee. They are also the only ones that brought SB 199 to be heard. This is where the bill came from. These are the sponsors. These 6 people here in front of us right now, these 7 people, excuse me, sitting here in front of us right now. These 7 are the ones that brought SB 199, SB 200, because they combined the 2 together into one bill. SB 200 is a 25-75 split. This is their alternative to SB 199. If they can't get the $700 million in new taxes, they will go to the 25-75 split as their alternative. This bill was brought to us all by those here in the picture before us right now. They all sit on the Senate Finance Committee. Why is it so important to know about SB 199 right now? Well, it's passed out of the committee, and it has gone on to the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee is nothing more than a committee that is a rubber stamp to put it on the floor of the Senate. This is not going to go to any other committee. This bill has not seen any other committee. It has only been in the Senate Finance. Senate Finance is the only committee that has heard this bill besides the Rules Committee, which is nothing more than a group that rubber stamps it to say that this bill is done and can now go to the floor. By the way, guess who sits on the Rules Committee? Man, I got a chuckle because if you know the depth of the level that they go to push these corrupt bills, it's unbelievable. So SB 199, it had its final hearing in the Senate Finance Committee. It's only been heard in the Senate Finance Committee. And these folks sitting right there in front of you, these folks right there, they voted it through 4-3. And 4 of them said that this is now going to go to the Senate floor to be discussed. And there was only one amendment that was added in after the fact that Senator Wilson tried to get added in. And it was changing the language to a very simple, get rid of the may, and you shall follow the new formula that you're putting in place for paying the permanent fund dividend, getting it up to 50%. Guess what? It failed. Along the same lines that it failed for when it came, or the same lines that it passed to move on and to the Senate floor, was the same people that voted to make that fail. They did not want the word shall to replace the word may in the bill that they had in front of them. Once again, it just goes to show you the level of corruption that is going on there in Juneau. Excuse me. Oh man, I gotta take a second here. coffee, the breakfast of champions. So we've seen the Senate Finance, we've seen that. Let's move on to the next picture here. The fanatical anti-PFD Senator Natasha von Imhof, Queen of Nothing, is determined to take all of your PFD. She has decreed that Alaskans must stop being greedy and let her and her rich cronies have it all. If you haven't seen the world-famous clip of Natasha von Imhof, the greed, the entitlement, it's astounding. I just can't fathom it. Oh, it's just astounding. Well, irony is that when they were doing the final vote to push the SB 199 through, she had the gall to say, I really don't like this bill. I don't like the idea of taxing my constituents to pay Alaskans their PFD. You know, what she didn't say, if only we were to follow the statutory PFD law and actually pulled the money from the earnings reserve account as a transfer and paid Alaskans their statutory PFD, none of this argument, none of these corrupt bills we keep trying to push through would be necessary in the first place. Oh, man, the heartache going on there is just the greed, the entitlement. It's astounding. Now, I started this all out with the FBI investigation that is currently happening down there in Juneau. There has not been much word on it since the first day that it got started. And there's a reason for that. These legislators don't want you to know that the FBI is investigating them for pay-to-play fraud. And it all has to do with the Permanent Fund Corporation, which is why the Senate and the House have started their own independent investigation of the firing of Rodell to get to the bottom of this, that the chairs of that committee that are involved in the heads of that investigation, those chairs are the ones that are doing their utmost to make sure that the evidence doesn't come to light, which folks like Must Read Alaska has already took steps to uncover, which I read a good chunk of that to you earlier today. They want all of this to stop. They want this all to go away. They will do everything in their power to make that happen. So our budget is a good one here. Oil prices for the fiscal year 2022 to date. So oil prices throughout the past few years have been growing substantially. They've been increasing every single month. And we've been watching those prices skyrocket. And towards the very end there, you see in the fourth month, they see it teetering up and down around that $100 mark. And it's still holding steady around $100 and over. We had a $3.5 billion windfall this year, above and beyond what the budget was proposed by our governor. These Alaska legislators took every penny of it and spent it. They took that money, that $3.5 billion, and they flushed it down the toilet so that it wouldn't be available to any other Alaskans in different bills like HB 263 that they're pushing through in the House right now. That's another $300 million to go to power cost equalization. They want to inflation-proof their PCE accounts so that they get more money given to people that don't work for a living, that want their cost of their power cheaper than what they're currently paying. Mind you, they do live in places that their cost to ship it to them does enormously increase the cost. But if you weren't working a government job, you don't have a job anyways, and the state's paying that bill for you, and this just helps subsidize the bill. And I believe it was Hoffman who brought it up. Don't quote me on that, but he wanted to know why they were not allowing PCE to be spent on community buildings that are owned by the government. Why is that power cost equalization should be shared distributively, communitively for the community centers that they have there available. Now, these are government facilities that the community also uses as a meet and greet areas because they are the only big buildings inside of the village. And they now want us to add the power cost equalization to something that's already being 100% government funded in the first place, either through the local taxes or through our state and capital budget. But you can see by the oil revenue projections sitting there, we are, for the last past year, have been sitting $80 plus, dipped a little bit below in a couple areas, and now we're at $100 plus per barrel going through the pipeline. And they're expecting our increase in the pipeline to grow between 100,000 to 200,000 more barrels per day than what the current flow is going through there. If we could ever get the Willow project online, we could have 600,000 barrels of oil rolling through that pipeline on a daily basis. If we could get the rest of the expansion in Anwar going, we could have the a million barrel a day capacity flowing through that pipeline. Alaska would never have a revenue problem again after that. In fact, that extra money that would have been coming in, they could advance that towards actually building the LNG pipeline, moving us into the future of green energy. So that way, when there's less of a demand on oil and everything moves into natural gas, which is the next phase to green energy, even though they won't tell you that, Alaska would be ready for it, and we can reap the rewards of the profits that can be made off of the unlimited supply. They know that they got enough LNG sitting in the North Slope right now to power the entire world for the next 100 years, and that doesn't even tap into just a tenth of the potential that may be sitting there that I am aware of just in natural gas. If you look at oil, we could supply the entire world with oil for the next 100 years without a problem with what's within Anwar. No questions asked. But as you know what's going on, it's all been shut down. Any expansion of any new revenue that would increase the money that they have to spend on the budget so that they could stop stealing our permanent fund dividends, which they could easily do if they would just sit with a flat budget. But they won't do that. So what's extra in this year's budget? The budget has passed out of the House with significant changes that the governor amendment budget included. $60 million for a fiscal year supplemental appropriation to the Oil and Gas Credit Fund. $60 million, mind you. This is on top of the other, so it roughly comes out to around $300 million in tax credits that they're going to be paying out this year. Ignore that $60 million extra. That's $60 million above what the governor had already proposed to pay back in tax credits this year. So that's $60 million that was stolen from the $3.5 billion surplus they had sitting there. So here's another $1.215 million or $1.2 billion more dollars for forward funding for K through 12 to be used in fiscal 23. So there's combined $1.8 billion. Oops, am I that right? No, $1.3 billion just between those two things. And then they took another $60 million from the Marine Highway, and they want to use UGF. Now, mind you, why is this important to know? That was covered under federal funding. That was covered under the infrastructure package that we received. That was covered under the Corona packages that we have received. That $59 million is not supposed to be coming out of our taxes, but they got to be able to hide that extra revenue somewhere. So we'll just make that $60 million from the federal government. We can apply that somewhere else because we can funnel more of the taxes out of the account, and so that there's less there to help justify stealing the permanent fund dividend. So what else did they do? Another $27 million out of the UGF. The state agencies increased fuel costs. So while we're all desperately trying to survive this pandemic, astronomical inflation, gas prices going through the roof, double what we were paying a year and a half ago under Trump. And now they, instead of helping Alaskans by paying a full statutory PFD, they're going to make sure that they don't suffer, government doesn't suffer. They're going to give themselves more money to spend on their gas. Let that sink in a little bit. Just a little bit. So we got another $57 million coming from the House budget there. That $57 million is for K through 12 funding, conditional funding. That's if their new BSA laws don't pass. Now, mind you, if their new BSA laws pass, base student allocation, the amount that they pay per student doesn't pass, that $60 million goes to them. If it does pass, the new base allocation increases their budget by $60 million. That's why it would a contingent on whether or not it passes or not. Now, ironically enough, that they were to follow the current BSA laws that they've had a 10% reduction of overall students sitting in the seats this past year. They should be seeing a 10% reduction in their budget, which would be roughly about a $130 million budget cut. Keep wanting to do the billions when this time it's a million. So $130 million could have been cut from this year's budget, but they didn't. They didn't cut that budget. They want to give them $60 million more. Last year's early education in K through 12 was $1.34 billion. They want to give them $1.4 billion this year with this increase to their base student allocation, or the one-time $60 million bonus. Either way, they are subverting the laws, not following the laws that we have. And when they don't like the laws that we have, they just make up new ones or give bonuses, as seen here by their what's extra. So what is reality versus non-reality? Oh, itchy nose there. We got the comparison of the Senate finance scenario, which is the governor's budget versus what they have sitting there. And I'm going to just blow this right on up here so that we can get a really good view of this thing, and see if I can get this picture to get a little bit bigger than what it is here. Alright, ignore me in the background there for just a little bit. I just want to have everybody be able to read what we got sitting here. So the governor's budget, which is what's sitting on top there, the very top line, it says baseline. His budget started out with roughly about $4.8 billion, and you can see in 4.8, then 4.6, 4.7, 4.9, 5. Pretty much a flat budget all the way up to fiscal year 31, starting in fiscal year 23. Notice how they skip fiscal year 22, the year that we're in right now. They don't want to show that year because it's a lot more than what they're currently predicting down below. Fiscal 22, if you see the red line down below, is currently sitting up closer to the $8 billion mark, not the $7 billion that they have showing here. That's why they're showing 23 instead of showing us also 22, because they don't want us to see that money that they're spending this year, nearly $8 billion. Next year, they already plan on spending almost $7 billion by going by the graph down below. So the Senate Finance, their introduced budget is $6.556 billion in fiscal year 23, which is a $1.7 billion more than what the governor's proposed budget was. Why is that? They've got to spend the extra oil revenue that's flowing into our state right now, that $100 a barrel they're getting at the moment, all that extra tax revenue. Because if they don't spend it, if they put it away into, say, their CBR account or into the SBA account, both which are under the control of the legislators, if they put it in their own accounts, their own bank accounts, that means they can't justify stealing our permanent fund dividend. And that's the reason why that is. And this is the Senate, and this was presented when they did SB 199. This is the graph that they provided to all of us to read. And so I just wanted to pull that up a lot bigger there so that you can get a good look at it. So what is the House's version of it? Well, here's the same chart in comparison. This is the House version, and this is under their new bill, HB 260, that was just heard this past week. I didn't even know this bill was being heard or that there was testimony being given this last week, but they heard it. They snuck it in. Excuse me. If you were not following the Alaska Legis website for committee meetings that was coming up, you would never even know this bill was heard for HB 260. There was only 2 people that called in and testify. I thank both of them for calling in. They were phenomenal speakers, and they told that committee the same thing that we have told them with like SB 199, go to hell, Quit trying to steal our Alaskans' money that belongs to us, not them. This is ridiculous. So what's the difference between the House version and the Senate version for what they have out there proposed? Let's blow this one up too. Get myself out of the center of that there. All right. So you can see there's a big financial reduction between the House Ways and Means Committee and what the Senate had proposed. And a lot of that has to do with what they're proposing for the different bonuses that they want to give. Like the Senate wants to give a little less of the tax credits back than what the House is already proposing. They're both still wanting to do the $1.2 billion forward funding for K through 12, which is why their budgets are so dramatically high. If you look at the House Ways and Means version versus what the governor's version is the baseline, remember that. And then the House Ways and Means version is the version that would be under their new 50-50 POMV split, which is not a 50-50. If you listen to their entire scenarios, it's more like another cut version of a 25-75 step up that you will see only tiny little amounts going to you. And their step up program is very similar to what you see happening with SB 199, the picture that I showed earlier. Very small increases, and then there's the catch-22 clauses in the end to see a true 50-50. There's going to have to be some sort of new revenue to come into place, or they may or may not decide to actually go to the 50-50 plan, which is why either bill, no matter which one it is, doesn't work. Now, mind you, these models that have been presented by both the House and the Senate and have been put together for them to give to us, to show us what is going on out there and what their projected models based on their current bills are very corrupt. Not a single one of their models reflects how much is sitting inside of the Permanent Fund Dividend Corporation's ERA and corpus accounts. With all of their budgets that they show here, they never once show the Permanent Fund Dividend Corporation growing. That $82 billion, they don't see it going, they don't show it going to 84, 89, $100 billion. They never show the corporation's fund ever going higher. And this model that you see reflected here in front of you right here does not reflect an increase in the actual fund's value. It shows you a base model based on 5-year projection that has nothing to do with the based on reality. It's a past projection, not a future projection that we have seen sitting here in front of us. So as you can see by their budget, by their committee, versus what the governor has proposed and what the House has proposed, the House budget in red, the governor's is in blue. The House budget goes above and beyond every single year because it increased government spending, less PFDs to Alaskans, more to pay for government. Same thing that you saw when we looked at the SB 199 bill here. And we'll just shrink that one back down here real quick. Oops, whatever I just did, I need to undo that transformation. Let's turn off the 260 so I can get to the 199 a lot easier here. And we'll reduce this one down to get it over here so like be off to the side. But as with both of the bills that we had going on there, you can see the red line. The Senate's version of it is astronomically high. They hit the same $7 billion mark. Again, that all has to do with the K through 12 early education, $1.2 billion early funding. This has to do with somewhere around $2 billion being transferred into the SBA account, their savings account there in Juneau. And then they're transferring another billion or so into the Permanent Fund Corporation, into the earnings, not into the corpus, so that it can't be touched by them. A lot of monkeying around money that they have no business spending in the first place because it doesn't belong to them. It belongs to Alaskans. Follow the dang statutory PFD law. Hurry up, FBI. Get your investigation rolling. We're tired of you guys stonewalling Americans when it comes to the corruption in our governments, and we need to get this exposed now before it is too late. Get out there and do your flippin' job. So, who are the committees that we've really got to be watching out for and why? We have the Senate Finance Committee, which I pointed out earlier. These are the people that control all the purse strings down in Juneau. Everything and every penny that ever gets spent on the budget goes through these 7 people, and they're the ones that have dictated for the last 7 years. And for any that had ever sat on this committee over the last inception since 1949, when we become a great state of Alaska, every senator that has sat down there in the finance committees on either the House or the Senate controls the purse strings. They're the ones that tell the other, in the Senate, the other 13 legislators, this is the budget we're giving you, live with it. If you're lucky, if you have enough of the majority, maybe you'll get a few of your amendments through and get the budget that we put out there in front of you changed, but the odds of that happening is slim to none, because we have the minority, we have their votes, because we have things against them that have made sure that they have sold out the constituents' voices that they are supposed to represent to the special interest of Alaska. And as we were uncovering earlier, the pay for play is very deep with Senator Natasha von Imhof there in the center. In the House, we have the Alaska House Ways and Means Committee with Representative Ivy Sponsold, Representative Anna Wall, Representative Andy Josephson, Representative Calvin Siraj, Representative Andy Story, and the only other 2 that are against the other 5 that don't think the same way as them is Representative Mike Prax and Representative David Eastman. Everything you see that is destructive going through the House right now is started in the House Ways and Means Committee. HB 260, HB 259, the HB 5259, the split, the 50% goes to K through 12, the other 50% went to Alaskans, and it only went to Alaskans after they increased the budget and they have increased the taxes that they are getting from it. These are the kind of bills that they are putting through, and this is what they have going out onto the floor out there every single day. And then we got one more here. Where is it? That should be, I know it's here somewhere. Senate, House. I must not have pulled up the House's Finance Committee. Sorry about that. My last final picture of the day is just not here. So if you guys please like and share this video. I mean, Alaskans need to hear the truth about what is going on down there in Juneau. These folks are working their butts off to make sure that we are ripped up. They are ripping us off and stealing everything that we have. They don't care where that money goes. I mean, we got Natasha von Imhof. She makes it very clear where all of her priorities are. It is to her special interests. Her constituents' bottom dollar that comes out of their money, out of their corporations, that money is theirs to keep. She wants the money to come from the poorest of Alaskans. She doesn't care if you're living in poverty. That money needs to be paid by you to make sure her family and the corporation that they run is well funded, and she gets to continue to keep feeding off of that trough that is sitting out there right now. We got SB 199, which at the time when this bill came out at the beginning of the session, overwhelming testimony telling them to hands off our PFD. Very, very vocal about that, and I want to bring back up what I was talking about earlier. I said I would get back to it, and that was what the PFD formula proposals provoke strong public reaction. This is from Homer News. Familiar divisions over the permanent fund dividend were on full display Monday as the 2 proposed bills' new formulas for the annual payment to the Alaskans was heard in the Senate Finance Committee. In public testimony, a series of callers exorcerated committee members over the state's failure to pay a PFD based on the statutory formula from the 1980s. I am frustrated and disgusted, one caller said from Wasilla. Several callers accused lawmakers of stealing people's money and said they would be voting to hold a constitutional convention in November's election. Several callers used the word disgusted, and some callers referred to the lawmakers by name, calling them thieves. I might have been one of them. Inability to agree on change of the dividend formula has caused deep division in the legislature for the last years. Last year, lawmakers went through 4 special sessions, the most in the state history, and we're only able to develop a loose framework of ideas. The state future, many lawmakers and the Governor Dunleavy, who campaigned on paying the traditional formula, have coalesced around a so-called 50-50 split, and only half the percent of market value draw from the permanent fund goes to pay the dividend and the rest to state services. The only people that agreed with that, and I am one of them, was if it was to be put into our Constitution. Since they failed to do that, statutory PFD is the only thing that is ever will be acceptable to any of us. Sorry about that. But lawmakers in the administration have been unable to agree how to get to that split. Projections from the Legislative Finance Division shows the state unable to pay for the 50-50 split without roughly $700 million in new revenues. Both bills were sponsored by the Senate Finance Committee, which has considered influence on the state's budget. They have come up with a plan. It was SJR 6. It was the constitutionally protected 50-50 PFD. It showed a balanced budget. It showed a stress test budget. And it was reflected on the lower oil prices that were hovering around $60 to $50 a barrel. And not the $70 to $120 a barrel that we're currently seeing right now, and we are projected to see for at least the next 2 to 3 years before it'll get back down to $70 a barrel, which they're predicting somewhere within the 5-year frame, depending on how long the Ukraine-Russia war continues on. Senate Bill 199 would pay an $1,100 PFD next year, increased to $1,300 by fiscal year 2025. This year's PFD is supposed to be $4,300 going to each and every Alaskan, and they want to give us $1,100. Next year PFD is supposed to be even higher, $4,500 to $4,700, based on the 5% market value based on the original statutory formula. These legislators are saying $1,100 next year when we're supposed to see closer to $5,000. We're seeing less than 25%. This isn't even a 25-75 draw. This is what SB 199 that they presented, that they passed through the Senate Finance this week and are going to be having on the floor coming up either this week or next week to be discussed before the actual budget gets put onto the Senate floor, because they would rather have this bill passed and subvert our laws once again. And mind you, this new SB 199, which I really will be shocked if it passes on the floor, but if it does, it's a 75-25 split. It is the same budget that you see coming out of the House right now, no different. And this bill would go over to the House and they would more than happily sign it pretty much as is, because this matches the agenda that's going on over there to a T. So what happens if it does pass? It goes to the governor, and the governor, and if he ever expects to ever hold a political office within Alaska ever again in his entire life, he will rightfully so pull out that red pen and veto SB 199. And I'll guarantee you they do not have enough votes in the House and the Senate combined to get the 3/4 override they need to override the veto for that. That's our only saving grace that we have here in Alaska. But I'm not holding my breath that Governor Dunleavy would do the right thing. He has not impressed me the last few years the way he caved to the Recall Dunleavy campaign and the monsters that created against him, the will of government. It's amazing how the left will throw their entire weight, lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, when the governor's not along their political agenda. But the minute one that is in their political agenda gets into office and they're consistently and constantly breaking the laws, which is not what the governor has been doing. He may have broke a couple, but not in consistency of what Walker had done. And not a single lawsuit. Walker didn't get sued. The only person who sued Walker was Bill Wielechowski, scarily enough, and he lost. And because it was a flawed lawsuit to begin with, and we got a Supreme Court in Alaska that's bought and paid for by the same special interests that have brought us this socialist agenda that should be making every Alaskan want to vote for the Constitutional Convention coming up here this year. Oh, so Dunleavy urged Alaskans to give testimony against the bill on Twitter on that Monday when the SB 199 testimony was given. The governor said the bill favored the government over the people. He is not wrong. Governor, quote, "My position remains the same. Government should never get more than Alaskan resource wealth than the people." Dunleavy said, "That is why my budget provides a PFD that Alaskans expect and deserve, paying a remaining $1,200 of last year's PFD and a full 50-50 PFD of $2,500 for this year." So we should have been, under the governor's original proposed budget for this year, seen at least $3,700. All we're seeing is $1,250 for the PFD and what they call a stimulus check to help us all out during these economic high inflation, high gas times of $1,300, which gets it darn near close to the $2,500 they were supposed to give us under the governor's proposed plan. But we've got to make sure this stays very clear here. That is not a PFD. That stimulus is not a PFD. The legislator wants to make sure you understand, even though that money came from the Permanent Fund Corporation from the ERA account as their POMV draw, that money is not a PFD. Don't you ever confuse that. We don't want you Alaskans to think that money belongs to you. We want you to feel this to be a generous gift that we're giving you. And because of this gift, vote for me. But members of the Finance Committee were skeptical of the governor's projections, noting the price of oil was likely to decline. This was January. Where are we right now? The oil prices are likely to decline. Spring forecast came out, $3.5 billion windfall. They were no longer had a deficit, they had a surplus. And they went on a spending spree, funding every wildest, wettest dream they have ever had, and went and spent every penny of it so that there would be nothing left. Quote, "Just like you don't build a church based on attendance at Christmas and Easter," said Senator Natasha von Imhof, Republican of Anchorage, "you don't pass a dividend based on a $90 a barrel." Wow. Man, the greed and entitlement that is within that one is astounding. Committee Chair Bert Stedman, Republican from Sitka, Rhino from Sitka, noted the state had roughly $10.6 billion in statutory obligations, which many of which go unfunded for years. The governor's budget this year fully funds the state's obligations for school bond debt reimbursement, but lack the funding has been a point of contention in the past. So the governor had a lot of the stuff that in his proposed budget that was balanced, that did not spend the surplus, paying back bond debt, which they had been reducing year after year, but now they're going to pay the full amount this year. And yet still, they managed to spend another $2.2 to $3.5 billion of the surplus that they had on frivolous things out there once again, like illegally early funding K through 12 education. Not all of the callers testified on Monday were opposed to the proposals, but the vast majority that did were. Several callers suggested further cuts of the state's education system, one that I had named, the $130 million for 10% reduction in students they have, and the other reduction to government services so the state that could afford a larger PFD payment. Budget cuts should not determine how much of a permanent fund we should get. Our permanent fund is supposed to be a transfer from the earnings reserve account to Alaskans, but people, as the one pictured in the sewn up next to me there, this is what they plan to pay us, and that's their goal. And if they don't get that $700 million in new taxes, we'll never see a 50-50 split. You see that $1,300 on the third tier there? That's the biggest PFD we'll ever see if they change the PFD laws. And this goes for SB 199 and SB 260, which both were highlighted here today. Thank you all for being here today. I mean, it has been a wonderful, glorious time spending all this with you. I am glad that you could be here spending your time with me on a Sunday night. Please like and share this picture. this video. I really do appreciate it. Alaskans need to hear what's going on out there and help us grow. Go to our website, www.politadick.com, and click that support button. All proceeds go right back into making sure we have time available to do more videos like this one. And we also got a big event coming up this following weekend for election integrity. These people have been doing a tour around the state. I will be posting up more information on that here real shortly. And this is a suggested donations to come to this event. That you not necessarily need any money to be able to get in, but they're expecting capacity to fill up prior to the actual event by those that are going to be donating. So if you'd like to guarantee you can get yourself a seat, donate to a good cause. Like I said, I'll be posting it here in a little bit, and I also will be live streaming it this upcoming week. Hopefully I won't be flagged by the quote-unquote fake book fact checkers out there for YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, because I am going to be discussing election integrity, or they are going to be touching on election integrity from what I've seen of their videos from other presentations and other places. This is exactly what we're looking at. I'm not expecting to be flagged, but you never know. All you got to say is one wrong word and they shut you completely down. So Alaskans, this is from Dumb and Dumber. You can see us Alaskans are trying to pull our Alaska legislators off of the PFD. But as it is with our winter months here in Alaska, they've got their tongue solidly up that back crack, and they can't seem to get it out of it. A big depth perception problem on their part. In other words, they cannot see the writing on the wall, the destruction that they're doing to our economy here in Alaska, and they prefer it that way. Hope this was all informative for all of you. I hope I broke down the FBI investigation well enough to where you know what's going on with that. Senator Natasha von Imhof, Representative Ivy Spinonsholtz, Representative Kelly Merrick, Bert Stedman, Louise Stutz, Bryce Edgman. I could keep going down the list. The list is astronomical of those down in Juneau that don't work for us, and they are in control of these committees, and they are making sure that we don't have no voice and say of what goes on with them down in Juneau. They've already sold it out to the special interests like the Rasmuson Foundation, Alaska AFL, Alaska NEA, Siri Corporation, you name it. These folks, they have sold their souls to them, and the majority of Alaskans that don't belong to any of these organizations, bend over. We're going to give you the shaft, and don't mind us. We're here to screw you. Help us grow. Go to our website, politadick.com. Make sure you like and share this video. You guys all have yourself a great night.